Okay, this looks great. Sing song
Marvelous.
physics. Great.
All right, sing song
Good to
physics.
go.
Right. Yeah. So to just give you a little bit of background of where this came from, last year I did a project with Oxford University public engagement to write songs, co-write songs with academics about their research. And it turned out to be fantastically successful for helping academics in terms of how they're able to explain their science to the public. With Michaela Livingston-Banks, who is a public engagement facilitator for Oxford University, we came up with an idea of seeing if we could co-write songs with members of the public there live with them in front of them. So it involved basically going to 4 places. There was a shopping centre, a museum, a science museum. We had a family fun day and a carnival. And we set up and we wrote songs. The academic did a bit of explaining about their science, and then we did the song. So I'm going to talk you through this project start to finish, some of the background thinking behind it, and some of the more sort of theoretical side of that, and then how it panned out, because it was a pilot project that we had funding for, so we had to evaluate it as much as possible. So we've got lots of data, which is great. So the first thing really is, why should researchers engage the public? In other words, why did we get money to do this in the first place? Which is really researchers need support for their funding, so they need the public to be on side. Some of them do it just because they really enjoy the work. Some do it because it does improve their communication, which is particularly good if they want to end up doing lots of speaking, or perhaps end up on TV or something like that. A lot of academics feel that the public just should know about what they're studying. It'd be good for their health or good for many other reasons. So that's another reason to get out there. And it's increasingly seen as important for academics to understand how their work affects the public. And it's important that the public understand how the academics' work affects them. So they're kind of the reasons that we did the whole project in the first place. But there's no point in doing this project if you don't know why the public engaged. And in fact, Jeff mentioned some of this in his video poster, which is essentially most of the public don't engage with science through their school life. Most of science learning over the lifetime happens in a very informal way, either through the news or going to museums or that kind of thing. So ultimately, the public engage with science because they're interested. So they tend to have very patchy understandings of science. They might just be interested in space. So they know lots about space, but know absolutely nothing about what an atom is. A lot of people nowadays, more and more, will get engaged with science because it's entertainment. We've got a lot of science entertainment now. That's how I've been making my living for the last few years. And it's a growing industry, science entertainment, which is great. Some people will engage in science because it's useful for work. They need to just to get on, possibly because it's in their everyday life. Maybe they get a health problem and they need to go and understand something about their body in order to deal with that health problem. And increasingly, there's a lot of people a lot of researchers getting the public involved in their research themselves. So that looks like things like citizen science, where you might have, there's a great one where you get people to classify galaxies based on the millions of photos of galaxies that we have. It's really useful research, but it can be done by anyone. So that's another way to involve the public. And some might be interested in that, not many, it should be said. Essentially what there are a few models of how you engage, and the one that most public engagement goes through with researchers is what we might call a deficit model, where the researcher it's very top down, the researcher has all the knowledge, they know what the audience should learn, and they're going to give it to them, and that's it. But it's recently it's been quite criticized as a model of dissemination of science. It's not very democratic. Essentially, big institutions have a lot more power than diffuse individuals. So when they decide what science we should know, that's a bit patronizing, really. And really, we need to give the audience a greater voice in what they're learning and how they're learning it. So this is what you might call more of an asset-based model, where actually the researcher has a lot to get back from the audience. So the more that the audience gives, the more the researcher can gain. So in the case of Sing Song Physics, the researcher was getting some like live feedback on how their communication works. They were even getting a resource to use in public engagement at the end of it in the form of the song. So researchers were getting a lot back from this process as well. Now, the advantage of doing it like this is that you can see sorry, I've lost my train with that. I'm gonna move on, because the way this model worked really was by involving me as well as a third professional. So I get something from this process because I always get to learn about some amazing current research that's going on. I also get to write songs with members of the public, which is fantastically enjoyable. But the researcher will have the sort of the communication side of things scaffolded by me. I've got a much better idea than they do of how to engage audiences, because that's part of what being an artist is, part of what being a musician is. You engage audiences for a living. So and the audience also, of course, get something from me in that I can have a bit of fun songwriting with them. So that's the idea. So from a theoretical basis, this is very much an asset model of engagement. There's some great writing by Falk et al. On this kind of thinking. I won't read everything here, but the other thing for the educationalists out there, it also fits into constructivist and social constructivist models of learning, because all the participants are essentially using the songwriting process to construct their own understanding of what they've just been told by the academic. We use a variety of learning styles throughout the whole process because they do a very hands-on kinesthetic activity. They listen to some just being told about the science, and then we do this kind of auditory kind of stuff with the song as well. So it ticks lots of boxes, and it really fits into the kind of social constructivist thing, because we've got skilled experts scaffolding the learning and helping the participants to improve in their own way. So how did we write the song? So the way it works is I have an initial meeting with the researcher. They tell me about what they do, and we work out what we want the content of the song to be, because that is the key thing. Because then we will design an interactive activity that will support the learning that needs to happen for the songwriting process to take place. Now, in the pilot, over the 4 things that we did, we actually wrote 3 songs over those 4 sessions. I kind of ended up taking 2 approaches to the songwriting. So the first approach was very much getting the researcher to tell the narrative of their research. So we get a real sense of what they do and why they do it. But that presents some problems in songwriting, in that if, say, so a participant comes up and they learn a little bit about the research, but we've already written that part of the song, they've got very little that they can offer the song. So we came up with another way of doing it, which we used in a song about asteroids. And each participant was able to write a very self-contained verse, which was based on personal reflections of the science they learned. So in this case, they all got to design their own asteroid, and their verse described how that asteroid may have come about, how fast it's moving, what shape it is, what it's made of, that kind of thing. So going back to the first thing, when I'm training researchers to write songs about their research, I've come up with my own method of pulling the story out of what they do, which I called the 4 cons. Some have called it the Berliner method, which I'm very pleased with. So the first con is context, which is basically what happens in verse 1. What do people need to know before they can understand any of the research? You've got to define the terms, and that's basically it. Verse 2 is effectively the conflict. What's the problem that the researcher is trying to understand, and why does it need to be solved? Verse 3, or possibly, yeah, verse 3 is the conduct. So how do you go about solving the problem? It's really important that researchers include their methods when they're doing public engagement. Very often you get these kind of YouTube explainers and they just say the facts. Experts think this, but they don't say because they did all of these like painstaking experiments. And there's some evidence to suggest that we value experts less when we simplify what they do, which you know, has implications, particularly in the kind of post-truth world that we're in, I think. And then finally, for the last verse, you want to conclude what we've learned, how was the problem resolved, and what's gonna happen. So that's what how I will train people. Let's move on. So this is exactly what we did when we did the intervention. So we set up in a public place. I have to say my favorite place was the shopping center. I'll talk about why when I go through our outcomes. Then the participant does an activity with the academic. I then ask the participant about what they learnt. I write 1 or 2 lines on a whiteboard, just using their words. So the first 2 lines of what they write or what they contribute to the song is their words lyricized by me, because it's quite a hard thing to just put someone on the spot and get them to write lyrics in a few minutes. But what I'll do is I'll get to the end of the first line and I'll say, here's the end of the line. This is the word we need to rhyme. And I'll say, you know, what word rhymes with that? And we'll write the second line together. So they really do feel ownership over the lyrics that have been written. I'll sing back to them what they've done so they get an idea of it. We might even do a performance at the end of the day so that they can come back and listen to the final song. Then I'll go away and I'll refine the song, because it's very difficult in a shopping centre to write a polished, finished work. But I'll go away, I'll refine it and I'll record it. And then we posted the songs online for the public to listen to. So luckily this was all evaluated quite well. So we did it through semi-structured interviews with the participants and parents of participants, because overwhelmingly participants were children. And we asked them, how did you feel about your experience with the activity? Were you aware of the research that you heard about today? And do you think it's likely that you'll look up more information about the research? We also took reflections, my own reflections of the researchers and of Michaela, who was the facilitator of the whole thing. And we took a mood board. So here were the results. As you can see, the picture on the left, that is one afternoon of writing. That's 13 verses. Every verse is a different asteroid. I was particularly proud of that. On the right is a photo. You get an idea of what it looked like. There's me sat talking to a child, desperately trying to get him to tell me about Redshift. There we go. So in all, we wrote 3 songs. We recorded videos for them. We engaged with 537 people in person over the 4 events, around 230 in Science Museum, because there were a lot more people. They were a lot more interested because they already loved science. They weren't actually the people we were trying to reach. Templar Square is the shopping centre. It's in the poor part of Oxford. Everyone we spoke to had absolutely no outside particular interest in science, and yet we got them to engage for 15-20 minutes with cutting edge research. That's the one we are most proud of. At Family Fun Day, we engaged 200 people, but nowhere near that many were willing to spend that time to write the song, because there was loads of other fun stuff going on. And at Cowley Road Carnival, I mean, it was a proper carnival. There was reggae music blaring. It was a very hot day. There were very few children around, and most of the people I spoke to were actually drunk scientists. So we've got a song actually written by drunk scientists, which didn't turn out that badly in the end, as it turns out. By posting the videos online, we know that we've tracked almost 100,000 people have seen the videos or engaged in some way with it. And we know that nearly 1,300 people have actually followed links or clicked on something, which is not bad at all for the amount of work that we put in to preparation and on the days. So it's quite a time efficient way of working with researchers. I won't go into everything here, but they're on the slides which are uploaded, so you can read them. But 10 out of 15 interviewed knew very little about the research topic, and 7 said they'd learnt something or increased their understanding. That's not bad given the sort of the time we were with them, but I can definitely say that in the majority of cases, I saw evidence of learning, because I was there saying, "What have you learnt?" And the participants were just repeating back what they'd learned. So all of the lyrics are demonstration of learning, which is, I think, a really strong thing from this. Another really strong point is that 14 of the 15 respondents said they enjoyed it. The mood board was overwhelmingly good, but was very hard to see whether it was being abused or not. I suspect it was in some way, but overwhelmingly, this is a really enjoyable thing for people to do as a drop-in, weren't really expecting to do it thing. Most stayed for 10 to 20 minutes. They said that they really enjoyed the songwriting because they got a sense of ownership over what was happening, and they wrote their lyrics on a little card and took them away with them. It was very sweet. Young people were far more likely to engage with the songwriting, but that's partly because I think adults didn't want to take that experience away from their children. What was really lovely, though, was that whilst I was writing songs with children, their parents were stood asking more complicated questions to the researchers and actually learning more. And an overwhelming number of respondents said they actually wanted to look up more information. So it's a really good way of sparking interest in science at the very least. Although we actually have no evidence for whether they did or not, because that was a bit harder to work out. Researchers had some really good outcomes too. They got to experience engagement with a real wide variety of people from really varied backgrounds and ages, which meant they really learned a lot about how they pitch their explanations. They got insight into how to plan activities in the future, and they got a lot of increased confidence. What was really nice is actually a lot of them are like, yeah, songs work, I want to use them again in the future, which also bodes well for me because that's more work. So the things that were sort of a bit harder were, it's really hard to track long-term outcomes with drop-in events. And the planning is very careful because you need to make sure you've got a range of activities that can be pitched at ages from 4 to like 85. And one thing you can't expect is that there's going to be very much detail learnt from song. Partly that's down to time, but I think that's something about teaching through song. It's a very particular type of learning, which you're not going to necessarily go away and pass a degree on songs alone. I think we can all sort of accept that. Location is something that we really need to think about. Doing it places that are noisy doesn't work, but you can write songs with the public in a shopping centre because they're not that, or you call them a mall, I guess. They're not that noisy. You can find a sort of a quiet corner where you can do this stuff and you'll still get some traffic. And the other thing is to introduce the songwriting. You need some really good, interactive, concise, clear activities, and preferably one, this is something we found, where the participant can actually take something with them. So what worked really well with the asteroids is they made their own asteroids out of Play-Doh and marbles and things like this, and they brought it to me, and they had something that they could see in front of them that I could ask them questions about. And I'm just going to finish up with implications for classroom songwriting, because of course many in this webinar are classroom people. So it's great that songwriting was the favorite element. They preferred the songwriting to this hands-on science activity. It shows that songwriting is a really, really good way of teaching science in a classroom. It will be enjoyed and it will be effective. From a teacher point of view, seeing the lyrics that have been written are enormously good feedback to how your teaching has gone. In England, we call this assessment for learning. I don't know if that's across the pond. And there's a huge amount of research on assessment for learning, mainly done by a guy called Dylan William and a guy called Paul Black. It's really good research and amazing stuff has come out of it. And I think songwriting feeds into that discussion because it's direct feedback and direct assessment of what has been learnt. But as I mentioned earlier, it's probably unlikely that you can teach detailed content through song. But I think we can all agree, as a way of consolidating learning and making it memorable, songs are, I think they are second to none in that. But I would say that because I'm biased, and that's me. Any questions?
Yeah, Johnny, I have a question. This is Tiffany.
Yeah.
You seem to have a phenomenal response, just sort of impromptu, in the sense that people did not expect to go shopping and write a song. Do you have plans for actually making and advertising an event that would potentially, do you think you'd get, I think you'd get great response at this point from your first experience.
So we would, but weirdly, it's the opposite of what we want to do, because we really want to engage the hard to reach audiences. So if you put science on there, you're losing all the people that you want to engage.
Okay.
Whereas
cool.
if you just show up where they would have been anyway, then you can say, you know, I'm writing this song, will you help me finish it? You get over their preconceptions about science, and there's a human face, and they go away having had this unexpected experience. So whilst you could probably reach more people by advertising it, you might not reach the people that you want to reach, which is, so that's why we've taken this tack.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question from Walter. Were researchers present at the table? Yes, they were. So the public engaged with the researchers for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then engaged with me for about 5 to 10 minutes. So it was pretty split. We've got sort of a conveyor belt approach, where a kid will arrive, get the spiel from the researcher, and then I'll take them, and then another kid will arrive and get the researcher whilst I'm writing some lyrics with the previous kid. So yeah, that's how that worked. So yeah, any other questions? I'm not sure about this picking up a gallon of milk question. That's gone over my head. So yeah, I'll give you examples of hands-on activities. So we had one on a song about redshift. What we did, the researcher works by looking at galaxies, trying to find the most distant galaxies. So what they do is they look at pictures of the universe through different colored filters on their telescopes, and basically at different distances. So if you're looking through a red filter, for instance, all the red galaxies disappear, and they're the ones he's looking for because they're the furthest away. So we made these posters of galaxies in space, and just made lenses of different colors that the kids could look through. It was just really simple, really hands-on, and it kind of was exactly what the scientist does himself. So that was really cool. And the other one we had with the antimatter song, that was a little bit less hands-on. We did have a thing to show that you have two types of particles. So you've got matter and antimatter, and the difference is they'll spin in different ways. So we had hats. We had different hats. One was an anti-hat and one was a hat. And we got the kids to put them on, and they stuck their arms out. I'm going to do your demonstration. So one person would be matter with their right arm out, the other would be antimatter with their left arm out, and they would walk past a sort of a post and see that they spin in different directions. The other thing we had a little particle detector a makeshift particle detector, which didn't work at all because it was so hot outside. It was the hottest day of the year. Then I'm about to do one in a few weeks with a microbiologist, and they've actually developed a computer game to teach microbiology. So that would basically be our hands-on activity, which is great. Let's see, I've got one more question here. So to relate this to what I did last year, it was simply writing songs with the academics. This year I went through the songwriting process with the academics, but didn't write the song with them. Crucially, we left that up to the public to do with me. But we were just convinced by the work we did last year, which was called the Musical Abstract Project. We had some great songs come out of it. We were convinced that it was great training for the researchers, and we just wanted to spread some of that goodness to the public as well, rather than just singing the songs at them. We wanted to involve them, and so far it looks to have been really successful. So we will look at how we can develop this idea even further. We're sort of talking about how we can make this a more sort of a longitudinal thing and get people to write songs over longer. Oh, sorry, yeah, posting videos. There you go. There's the link to all the videos of the songs. I will put it in the chat as well, so that you can just go and look and watch at your own leisure. So, unless there's any other questions, thank you for listening.
Jonny, thank you so much. And you can also check out Jonny's stuff at jonnybellinger.com. And
I'll put a link to that in the chat as well.
Okay, excellent. And one of my favorite things is you call yourself a geek pop genre entertainer, and I like that about you. So check him out. He's got a wide range. And so thanks a lot for being with us. We know it's late for you over in England.
My absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure.